Hey, this is Yazuki Wolf, and welcome to another episode of our manga workshop series. Today we're going to be talking about Shuchu-Sen. These are a type of Koka-sen, which are basically just effect lines, I guess you could call them, in which you have a focal point, which you put usually maybe in the middle or in the corner or something, and then you have a whole bunch of lines that kind of draw the viewer's attention to that focal point. So Shuchu-Sen in Japanese literally means focus lines, basically. Alright, and there are so many different ways you can do these. These are probably one of the most iconic types of Koka-sen in manga. Like, generally when you see these, that's like a clear indication that you're reading a manga, I think. You could do it with just the lines. You could do it with a black area turning into the lines. You could do lines across. You can make them curved. There's so many different ways you could do it. I'm not sure how many we'll be able to cover here, but just be creative, I guess. So we're going to start with the basics, which I have prepared this koma here for. And I prepared it by getting the matte tape along the edges, as we always do. And then what we're going to do is we have our scrap paper here to kind of be able to test out. Actually, just use, yeah, this is good. Okay, and this is just to test out your ink before you put it on the paper. And I generally use, as I've mentioned in my other videos, Menso Fude and all these other different types of tools like meaty pens and things. But I found that for these types of lines, what's worked best for me is either the Maru pen or the G pen. Especially the G pen, I think. The Maru pen is also very good, but the Maru pen is going to be very thin lines, and you won't be able to cover quite as much space as quickly. So for me, the G pen seemed to be a good bet for most situations. And so now, first we need to have our focal point, and I'm just gonna put that somewhere around the middle. I don't think you don't have to be too specific about it. Usually if you had a drawing here, you'd want to make it like at where a punch is coming, you try to like make it the focal point around the fist, or if you want to have like a character that just shows up, have that character be the focal point, something like that. But here we're just going to make a point here, and then we're going to have an area that I kind of want to keep open. So I'm going to just kind of lightly make a circle around here. This is just to remind myself that when I'm drawing the lines, I don't want them to go in too far inside of this circle, because I want to kind of keep this open. You kind of see in this one that I did when I was a student, here you have like this open space here, but then all of a sudden around this area, all these lines kind of just break in, and that's kind of like it's not a particularly well done Shuchu-Sen. You really should kind of have more of a sense of where the opening is. But that doesn't mean that you want to have your lines perfectly mechanical either. You want to have some type, you want it to go in a little bit at some points and out a little bit at other points. But basically it's just letting me know that the general range that I want to shoot for is somewhere between, is a little bit inside or a little bit outside of this this circle area that I drew here. And if you're really used to doing these, you could probably skip this stage. It's just something I do to kind of remind myself. I'm actually not even sure how well you can see that on the camera, but trust me, there's just like a light circle around there. So now next step, we have the, so yeah, oh yeah, there's everything I was gonna say. Sorry, brain died for a second. So when I checked my my school textbook, they mentioned a way to do this where you could take a thumbtack, and then you basically just put matte tape through the thumbtack, or put the thumbtack through matte tape rather, and you put that down and have that be your focal point, which you could then rotate your ruler around while you draw. I don't particularly like this, so I'm not going to do that. If you find a way for it to work for you better, then you can. That's a suggestion of something you could do. I found that for me, one issue is that when you push against this, it kind of seems to give and take in different ways, and the longer you keep going, the more it starts, the tape starts to come loose, and it slightly changes where your focal point is a little bit. And the other thing is, like, I just don't like having to worry about putting my hand down on a tack. Maybe if you could like blunt the edge or something. But anyways, that's just something for if you want to experiment with that. You can try that and see if that makes things easier for you or not. But I'm just gonna do it the, I guess you could say, old-fashioned way, or the kind of simple way of I'm just going to line up every stroke that I do to hit this this dot here. All right, so let's see. This paper is getting kind of dirty, but hopefully most of that won't come up in an actual print. So we got our G pen, and now we got our ink. So first, let's dip our G pen into some ink. It looks like I might have some oil on this. Yeah, this is pretty oily. So if you guys remember what you do when you have oil accumulated on your pensake and it's not quite, the ink's not flowing very well. All you gotta do is burn the oil off. And if you don't have a lighter, you can try just rubbing it, wiping it off with like cloth or something, but usually just a quick couple of strokes with the flame should be able to get rid of most of the excess oil. And see if that's gotten any better. Oh, it's coming down. Yep, there it is. Okay, so the ink's flowing now. Okay, so I'm going to start at the upper left-hand corner, and then I'm just going to be rotating the paper around until I get to the end of my journey, I guess. And keeping in mind while I strike each line that I want the line to end somewhere somewhere either before or after the circle that I drew in the middle. Let's actually start at a smaller point. Let me start here. Okay. Got a little too much ink on here. Wow. Just had a whole drop of ink fall on here. We'll have to clean that up later. You don't really have to be particularly consistent about the spacing or the width of the lines. This is probably the thing you have to pay more attention to is the direction of the lines. Make sure that each stroke is really lined up very well. Because if you have one line that kind of falls outside of the direction of the other lines, it stands out a bit. Now right now my ink ran out mid-stroke, so the stroke that I just did is incomplete. So I'm holding the ruler where it was for the time being so that I can reload my pen and draw another stroke on top of it. I had some ink accumulating on my ruler, so I'm wiping that off now. And I'm taking this very slow, so I may be speeding it up quite a bit in the video. But take your time when you're doing it yourself. Okay, at this point, another thing to be concerned about is whether this side is dry or not. Because as you continue to move, you're going to start putting your ruler over the other side. Now, with my ruler, it's only touching where where these coins are, so it's not as big of a concern for me. But if your ruler is flat against the paper, you might want to check to make sure that this is dry. And even if your ruler is like this, you want to be mindful of where you're putting your coins down also. I think mine is not completely dry, so I might want to give it a little bit more time before I continue. Huh. It looks like while I was talking, apparently some of the ink there smudged somehow. Maybe did that happen when I was moving this? I don't know. But that's okay, because we could fix that later with white ink. So I'm going to give it a little bit of time to dry, and then I'm going to continue on from here. Okay, I think it's more or less dry enough for me to continue. So we're going to continue around the other half. Now I'm trying to keep the angle more or less consistent while I'm doing this. So that's why I'm not really like taking the ruler and going around this way, but I'm actually moving the paper a little bit more than I move the ruler. The reason for that is that I'm lining up my ruler with the how you say it? When I'm lining up my ruler with the focal point, my eyes are seeing it from a certain angle, especially since my ruler is raised up above the paper to a certain extent. The angle at which I'm viewing it from could actually change how it looks. Like it could look like I'm lined up when really I'm not possibly lined up if I am looking at it from a different angle. So I'm trying to keep the angle at which that I'm lining up the ruler with the focal point to be relatively consistent for each stroke. Now I imagine that a lot of you, when you do this, are probably going to be a lot cleaner and neater than I am, and probably can have nowhere near as much splatters of ink and dirt all over your paper. But that is the reason why I kind of end up going more and more digital. That, and also that just in general as an artist, I'm not a particularly neat artist. I like making a mess and then finding a picture within that mess, you know? That's sort of my style. It's like, you call it like chaos, order out of chaos type of thing. And so, where was I going with that? Well, I guess that kind of like ties into the reason why I don't use tone that much, because screen tone kind of requires a certain level of neatness and tidiness to really do effectively, or how do I say it? The whole act of putting a tone on there has a lot of clean cuts and clean alignment of things and pasting things on and things. And with my haphazard way of drawing most of the time, and my more chaotic style, it didn't really mesh with me too much. So that's why I generally did most things by hand. And then that made my work have that sort of like hand-drawn type feel, which I like. But a lot of other artists, especially in Japan, tend to go for a more neat, almost mechanical type feels. I don't know if mechanical is the right word, but a much more neat style, which doesn't necessarily fit me too much. Wow, I'm just not that good at it. So I imagine if any of you are more of those neat and clean drawing styles, your focal lines are probably going to look a lot nicer than mine. And later on, I actually would like to show you what I usually did instead of these very clean focal lines in my art. I don't know if there's an actual word for it, but it's more of like a chaotic, I don't know, style to these. There's another, yeah, it's basically just another way to do these that are, it's kind of interesting that I kind of adapted that I would like to show you in a future video. And if I ever find out what actual name of it would be, I'll tell you. Alright, so we've finished our circle, but as you can probably tell, there's some parts that are a little out of balance, some parts that are kind of like, looks like, well, this area is maybe seeping in a little too much. Well, maybe it's okay, I don't know. But definitely we have this this smudged ink here, and there's some other messiness that we'd like to clean up. So we're going to give it a little while to dry, and then we're going to go over it again with some white ink. Okay, so I gave it some time to dry, and now the ink is probably pretty much dried, but there's been a lot of smudging and dirtiness all around that we have to clean up. So we're going to do that with our white ink. But the very first thing before we can apply the white ink, you want to make sure that you erase any pencil marks that you might have, or otherwise the ink might mix with even the pencil and make sort of like a grayish color. So we're going to take our eraser and we're going to erase the initial pencil marks we had down. And you'll notice around this area here there's a smudge here where I was testing to see if the ink was dry or not. that just kind of like smudged across the area because the ink wasn't completely dry here. And the other thing to be kind of careful about is that the ink at this point was dry on the paper, but it wasn't dry on the tape here. So a little bit of ink from the tape kind of smudged across here and made this line across here. And if you don't wait long enough before you erase your pencil marks, you're gonna get a lot of things like that when you pull your eraser across the paper. So you want to be sure to kind of give it a good amount of time to dry. I can't tell you exactly how long because it depends on which type of ink you're using, but a few hours or so would probably be a safe bet. Alright, so now we got to clean this up. So to clean this up, one really good tool to use would be a white ink pen. Unfortunately, this pen is one that I carried 5 years ago when I was in school, and when I tried to use it now I realized that the ink is all out and dried up, so I'd have to buy another one of these to use this. So we can't use this today. So today we're going to be using just plain old white ink put onto... Now, I'm not sure how effective this is going to be, but just to kind of show you that this is a possibility, I'll go ahead and give it a shot. You can actually put white ink on your Sped pen. So, like say I could put this on my G pen here, and then you basically just use it the exact same way that you would use regular black ink, but now you're just using white ink instead. Yeah, I don't think this is really... Yeah, I don't think it's going to work too well in this particular case, but just so you know that is another possibility that you could try out. But I'm going to use a brush because I think that's going to be the easiest way to apply it where I want the ink to go in this case. So let's just mix up our white ink a little bit. And you don't want it to be too thick or too thin. So just give like a nice consistency to it. You know, basically like white out or liquid paper, I think they call it in some places. And now we're going to basically do the same way as we did originally. We're going to start from this corner and go around in a circle and just clean up any areas that we have marks. It may go without saying, but I'm not actually using my Menso Fude for this. I'm using just a cheap brush that I don't mind getting all gooped up. Okay, so now we've gotten pretty much all the detailed work. So I'm just going to do the last blots in the middle. So look like there's a couple splotches in there. And then all you need to do is you just gotta wait for it to dry again. Try to make sure that you don't get too many like bubbles or like goops of ink there. Try to make sure it's fairly flat. You may find that you can still see the spots underneath from time to time. In this case, I think I pretty much was able to cover it all in one go, but if you do find that if one layer is not enough to cover up the spots, don't just keep gooping the ink on there. Just let it dry once and then go over it again later. Alright, so that's your basic, most common rendition of the Shuchu-Sen, but there are many other things that you can do with these. You can have the lines be thicker, start from a dark area and go into thin focal lines. You can have the lines actually curve. You can have the lines not focus at the middle, but focus at a corner or a different part of the koma. And I may try maybe one or two other type of patterns just to give you an idea of the other things that you can do here. But for today's video, I think I'm going to end it there. I hope that was helpful to you, and let me know any comments or suggestions you have in the comment box below. And until next time, Yoroshiku.